For nearly 4 years, the Kremlin has projected an image of an invincible economy. They claimed that Western sanctions had failed and that Russia had successfully pivoted to the east. But as the winter of 2025 settles in, the mask is finally slipping. The numbers don't lie, and they tell a story of a nation burning through its future to pay for a war it cannot win. Today, on Frontline Report, we analyze the official entry of the Russian Federation into a deep, systemic recession. On December 17, 2025, a critical announcement sent shockwaves through the financial world. While Moscow's propaganda machine continued to report stability, international observers and Ukrainian officials confirmed a grim reality. Russia is officially in recession. The artificial boom created by massive military spending has reached its limit. You cannot sustain an economy by producing tanks that are destroyed in a week. That is not growth. It is a slow-motion explosion of national wealth. The scale of the fiscal disaster is staggering. Between January and November 2025, the Russian federal budget deficit hit a record $54 billion. To put that in perspective, this deficit has wiped out years of savings in the National Wealth Fund. And it's getting worse. Analysts predict that by the final days of December 2025, the deficit will balloon to $70 billion. Where is the money going? It isn't going into hospitals, schools, or infrastructure. It is being swallowed by the defense industry, which is now operating at 100% capacity but producing zero value for the Russian consumer. The state is printing money to pay defense contractors, leading to a dangerous spiral of inflation that the central bank can no longer control, despite interest rates reaching emergency levels. For decades, oil and gas were the lifeblood of Putin's power. But in November 2025, that lifeblood began to dry up. Profits from energy exports plummeted by 34% compared to the previous year. This isn't just a minor dip, it's a structural collapse. With the loss of the European market and the increasing costs of shipping to Asia, Russia is being forced to sell its black gold at massive discounts, often barely covering the cost of extraction. The energy superpower is now a discounted gas station with no customers. When we talk about modern warfare, we often focus on the number of tanks or the range of missiles. But the most critical number is the daily burn rate of the national treasury. According to the latest intelligence reports from the GUR, Ukraine's military intelligence, the war in Ukraine is costing the Russian Federation an estimated $1 billion every single day. $1 billion. Every 24 hours. To understand why this is unsustainable, we have to look at where that money is going. It isn't just the missiles, which can cost up to $6 million each, or the fuel for thousands of armored vehicles. It is the logistical tail, the salaries for hundreds of thousands of mobilized troops, the massive death payments to families of the fallen, and the skyrocketing costs of repairing aging Soviet-era infrastructure under the strain of 24/7 production. Russia is currently in a state of cannibalistic economics. To keep the front line moving, the Kremlin is stripping resources from the civilian economy. Skilled workers are being pulled from factories and sent to the trenches, creating a massive labor shortage that is driving wages up and productivity down. Despite these catastrophic numbers, the atmosphere inside the Kremlin remains one of absolute denial. In a move that highlights the disconnect between political goals and economic reality, Vladimir Putin reportedly ignored a series of urgent warnings from his own top economic advisors. In a late 2025 meeting, when presented with the evidence of the shrinking GDP, Putin's response was not to adjust strategy, but to issue a decree. He effectively ordered that the recession not be allowed to happen, as if economic laws could be overridden by executive command. This creates a dangerous environment where Russian officials are now forced to cook the books, reporting fake growth to satisfy the leader, while the actual economy crumbles beneath their feet. Eventually, someone has to pay the bill for a $1 billion a-day war, and that someone is the Russian citizen. To bridge the massive $70 billion deficit, the Kremlin has begun a systematic campaign to extract wealth from its own population. First came the tax hikes. In a desperate move to stabilize the ruble, the government increased the value-added tax from 20% to 22%. This immediately drove up the price of every basic necessity, from bread to fuel. But the squeeze didn't stop there. Income taxes have been restructured, and the tax thresholds for small businesses have been lowered, effectively taxing the very people who provide the few remaining services in the Russian economy. As the government prints more money to fund the defense industry, inflation has become an invisible thief in every Russian home. The Central Bank of Russia has been forced to keep interest rates at punishingly high levels, well above 15%, making it impossible for ordinary people to get mortgages or for businesses to take out loans. The Russian people are being told that they are winning a great patriotic struggle, but in reality, they are watching their life savings evaporate. The social contract, stability in exchange for political silence, is being torn apart. For the first time since the 1990s, the specter of bread lines and empty shelves is no longer a distant memory. It is a fast-approaching winter reality.
While battles rage on land, a silent war unfolds across the world's shipping lanes, targeting Russia's clandestine ghost fleet of aging, uninsured tankers. By December 2025, a massive wave of international sanctions has tightened around Russia's oil exports, specifically targeting nearly 400 vessels in its shadow fleet. Once blacklisted, these ships lose international insurance, port access, and refueling capabilities, forcing them into a desperate game of cat and mouse, constantly switching flags. The crackdown has resulted in a logistical nightmare. An estimated 180 million barrels of Russian crude oil are adrift at sea, unable to unload. Under pressure from secondary U.S. sanctions, even Russia's closest partners, like Indian refiners, have slashed imports, fearing global financial system exclusion. This oil glut is destroying the profitability of the Russian energy sector, forcing Moscow to offer massive discounts, with Urals crude plummeting to $35 to $43 per barrel. Operating a sanctioned shadow fleet with longer, riskier routes around the Cape of Good Hope means many Russian oil fields are now operating at a loss. Beyond economics, the ghost fleet poses environmental and strategic risks. These old, poorly maintained vessels are a ticking time bomb for a major oil spill. For half a century, Russia and Europe's relationship was defined by energy interdependence, but that era is officially over as Europe seeks a total energy divorce. While pipeline gas was cut off, Russia found a lifeline through LNG, but on December 17, 2025, the European Parliament delivered a crushing blow. The EU voted to ban all Russian LNG from the spot market starting in early 2026, denying Putin the ability to sell emergency gas at high prices. The EU plans to phase out all Russian gas imports via pipelines by September 30, 2027, a death sentence for Russia's most valuable infrastructure. The power of Siberia pipeline to China cannot replace the European market, as China demands gas at prices that barely cover production costs. As winter 2025 to 2026 concludes, Russia faces a reckoning. The war economy boom is over, and the recession reality has begun. With the ghost fleet sanctioned, energy revenues collapsing, and a $70 billion deficit, the invincible Russian economy is running on fumes. The story of Russia's economy in 2025 is a cautionary tale of how quickly a superpower can be dismantled by the hubris of its leaders. Vladimir Putin gambled the wealth of his people on imperial conquest, but he forgot one truth. You cannot win a war if you cannot pay the bill. The bunkers are being built, sanctions are tightening, and energy lines are cut. The winter of 2025 is not just cold for Russia. It's the beginning of a long, dark economic winter.